Welcome to video 2 of this Python Basics course. Today we're going to be looking at variables. So, variables and why we use them. Variables are basically containers that we use to store data, and variables can be changed and modified over time throughout the program. Variables also have multiple different types that we'll look into later. So, using variables. In this example, we can see two variables, x and y, which values are being assigned to. For example, x is corresponding to 9 and y is corresponding to Adam. So, in this code, when we print x and print y, it prints 9 and Adam because those are the values that the variable is corresponding to. And this is basically called an assignment statement, when you're assigning a value to a variable. There are multiple different types of variables, but the four main basic types are integer, which are basically numbers, float, which are decimal numbers, which Python uses for things like division, string, which is a string in quotation marks of text, and boolean, which is basically a true or false value, but it's usually called bool for short. So to check the type of variable, we can use this type function. So here are the variables: 9, which is a integer, x, which is a string, y, which is a decimal float, and z, which is true or false, so it's a boolean. So here when we print the type of all of these variables, this is what it returns. So class integer, class string, class float, and class boolean. So that's the way to check the types of variables. Going back to our program in video 1, we asked the user for an input of their name and directly printed it by enclosing the entire input function in a print function. But instead of that, we can use variables to store the user response. And variables can be assigned to values that may change, such as an input function. So this image below with print hello world, and then underneath that, we're storing the input of the name in a name variable and then printing that. And as you can see here, the output for both of these snippets of code is the same. So, changing values of variables. As I said, variables can be changed over the course of a program, and they don't need to remain the same throughout the code. So, for example, in this one, x is first assigned to 9, and then it's changed to the string Adam. And when we print x, it prints out Adam. So since x was assigned to Adam after it was assigned to 9, the value of the variable switches to Adam. So variable name conventions and assignment statements. So variable names are restricted to how you can name them, and it determines how Python interacts with them. So variables need to start with a letter. They cannot start with numbers or any special characters. And in variable names, spaces and certain symbols are not allowed, such as the hashtag, @ and $sign. However, underscores are allowed, so you can use an underscore as a space for your variable. And variable names are also case sensitive. So if you write variable with a lowercase v and variable with an uppercase v, those will be seen as two different variables. And avoid using Python keywords as variable names so that the program doesn't get confused. For example, don't use print as a name for your variable. And as I said before, assignment statements are where you're assigning a value to a variable, such that we can see below with variable 1 and variable 2. So mathematical expressions. Python has many simple mathematical expressions, which are the main for addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division that it can perform. And as we can see here, it prints 10 plus 5, 10 minus 5, 10 times 5, and 10 divided by 5. And as you can see, for 10 divided by 5, since it's using division, it prints out in a float form instead of integer. So even though there's point 0 in the decimal place, it still writes it in decimals. So let's do some simple math with variables. For example, the area of a football field using variables. So first we can set the length here to 105, which is what is given to us here, and the width to 68, just like above. And then we can create an area variable and set it equal to the length multiplied by the width. And then we can print that area variable. So here's the output. We get 7,140, which is 105 times 68. So now we have converting variable types. So sometimes we need to convert variables to different types. For example, if we want to use an user input for maths, we have to convert it to an integer, because all user inputs are stored as strings. But if we want to use multiplication or division with it, we need to convert it to an integer first. So let's see how to do that. Okay, this is the code of the football field example. So if we want to use a user input with this, for example, for the length and width, we would have to use an input function. So let me just write what is the length here, and for width the same thing. Alright, and then the user input can be recorded and we'll use it for area. But as you can see, when we run this, let me write 50 and 25, it will give us an error because it cannot multiply strings. So since these are both strings, we cannot multiply them here. So one way to do this would be to use conversion with another variable. So we can make length 2 equals int length. So the int function here basically converts whatever is in here into an integer. So we can do the same thing for width. Okay, and then we can change the variable names down here as well. And then when we run it, as you can see, it'll return the number. Let me do 50 and 25 again, and it works, right? But a quicker way to do this without using these second variables, just sticking to the original, we can just put an int function around this entire input thing. So whatever gets returned from the input gets converted to an integer, right? So that is a quicker way of doing it, which works smoothly. And as you can see, we got the same output. String concatenation. So to concatenate or join a string to another, we can use the plus operator to join the two strings. For example, in this first example, where the name variable is Adam, and then we're printing the name is, end of the quotation, and then plus the name variable. So it prints the name is and then whatever's in that variable. So in this case, Adam. Now, if we want to concatenate with integers, for example, in the second one, where we're calculating the seconds in hours by multiplying the hours by 60 and by 60 again to get the amount of seconds. So then we can print in 5 hours, there are str, seconds in hours, seconds. So we're using the plus to concatenate, same as before, on both sides now, since there's a string at the end as well. But we have to use the str function around the seconds in hours variable to convert it to a string, since at the moment it is an integer after this calculation. So this is the output, and we need to convert it to a string with this str function, similar to the integer function, otherwise we'll get an error. So that is it for variables, and in the next video we'll be looking at for loops.